And welcome everybody. I do see we're getting up there in the numbers of people. So again, welcome everybody. Welcome if you're coming back, and a special warm welcome if you're joining us for perhaps the first time. Again, we will keep this as interactive as we can. We do try to keep these programs at approximately an hour, maybe spilling over into the 75-minute range, including questions and answers. So we'll try to keep it moving along pretty swimmingly. Let me also welcome our other two guests here tonight, or actually our first guest is Kim Butcher, and we invited Kim largely influenced by her winning contribution to the Better Investing National Convention stock picking panel. She picked the company ZAGG, that's ticker symbol ZAGG, last year, and I think it's up like, I don't know, 18,000% or something since last June. So she obviously walked away with those honors, and so we invited Kim to come and pinch hit for Cy tonight, and we look forward to seeing how our guest damsels of the Roundtable do collectively. Ann Manning's selection from a few months ago is actually at the top of the leaderboard already, so we're prepared to be humbled where we deserve it. And then also, Hugh McManus is joining us, I believe, from California tonight, and as you can see, he's begrudgingly giving up that Beefeater royal wedding hat. That's kind of sticking to him for several months, and it just seemed to fit so well with Oktoberfest tonight. This is actually the September edition. We try to do these sessions towards the end of the month, but we were all pretty well wrapped up last week. So this one actually spilled over into early October, but that just gave us reason to turn it into an Oktoberfest celebration, and then Ken is actually going to lead us on a couple minutes of discussions about objective setting. So Oktoberfest and objectives is our theme for tonight. Let me go ahead and get us kicked off a little bit. Here's the basic rundown. We'll basically do some big picture thing on objectives. Take a little look at where some of our picks have been. I don't think we have any outright challenges even yet tonight. No quick updates, and then we'll get into our stock selections, and we'll fill those in as we go.
And can I ask, why is it I am the only one who has picked a stock so far?
Well, Kim, that's a sensitive question. It would appear that you were the only one who got your stuff in time in order for it to appear there like that. So the three of us, in fact, I haven't picked mine yet, so I'll get that done here in a few minutes. But
I think, Kim, you're the only one that believes that when we set a deadline, we really mean it. So.
Well, thank you, Kim.
Well, I was just thinking that if I'm down in Florida, I better get my homework done because I'll forget all about this.
Well, that's true. Laying by the pool, we were kind of worried that you might not remember to show up tonight, but it's good. Good to hear you.
It's 8:30 at night. I think I wouldn't. You're safe. There's no sun out for me to lay out by the pool now.
Well, that's good. All right, here's our standard disclaimer. Most of you know this by heart. Again, this is not, no investment recommendation is intended by what we do here tonight. We do a lot of stuff at Manifest and in the chapters of Better Investing that focus on demonstration of some methods that we think work pretty well, and that's what this is all about tonight. Again, you're encouraged to do your own homework. Do not run out and simply buy something because we mentioned it. Leading into the big picture, I just thought I would underscore our session last month dealt with the fact that the market is being kind of nasty here lately since the beginning of August, and it's not something that's new to most of us here tonight. We do go through these periods from time to time. I do think we're at something of a dangerous tipping point that we talked about last month, but as we shared last month, the four of us basically just bear down and work even harder to identify opportunities during times like this. So again, the Wilshire 5000, that's the ticker symbol for the Vanguard mutual fund that covers the Wilshire 5000, has been under some pressure. And again, it shows up in, and this leads perfectly into Ken's discussion. We know that stock prices fluctuate, and we know that because stock prices fluctuate, the returns that we can expect from our baskets of stocks also fluctuates over time. So what you're looking at here is one of our favorite barometers. At Manifest Investing, we track about 2,500 stocks, and on a daily basis, we track the median projected return, known as MyPAR, for those stocks. And that's what you see from left to right with the blue bars. Again, the blue bars are MyPar, the median return over time. So you can see that back as that last bull market came to an end, they kind of got down in that historically low range. Again, the historical range is actually what's shown over here on the right-hand side, anywhere from close to 0 all the way up to 20 something. And then during the depths of the Great Recession, that horrible bear market, there was actually a period of time where the average stock out there had a projected return in the upper teens, perhaps even into the 20s. And again, in the background, kind of the background that you see here is the value line arithmetic average. Again, just another measure of the stock market. It's an index, and you can see fairly well how deep the pain has been here over the last couple of months. And again, when stock prices in general go down, the projected returns go up, and that's what we're seeing right here with MyPar actually reached, I believe, 13 to 14% here over the last couple of days. So again, it's just our reminder that this is a way to gauge the overall potential of the market. Again, it's a time to be careful, but it's also a time to be shopping carefully and being ready for, you may have even heard as you were coming in, we were talking about a small veterinary supply company that would be the type of company we might want to really latch into, especially if the correction or bear heads even deeper, because we know that the smaller companies are a great place to be. So again, just a reminder, stock prices fluctuate, therefore returns fluctuate also. So let's go ahead and switch to you then, Ken. You can talk about how returns fluctuate. You want to grab the screen?
Yep, as soon as I see the box.
You should have it.
There it is. Okay. And are you seeing my screen now?
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I want you to all sit back, and I just want you to do some thinking. You've all heard the mantra from Better Investing for 60-plus years now about our goal of 15%. I think it's a noble goal for us to set. It's a noble goal for us to talk about. You know what that 15% really means. It means doubling your money in 5 years if you were able to grow your portfolio at 15% annualized per year. But I want you to think a little bit about the times that were happening when that goal was set. That would put us 60 years ago, sometime in the early 50s. Think a little bit, if you weren't alive at that point, think about your parents, and think how they interacted with electronic devices. I think that would have been an interesting discussion for them to have had with other folks, because for the most part, it involved a single finger, usually the index finger, and it was pushing on things, or sometimes, if it wasn't a typewriter, then that index finger was inserted into a dial, and then you moved it in a clockwise direction and pulled your finger out, and the dial went back. That was on the phone. But there weren't many other ways to interact with electronic devices. There weren't calculators. If you wanted to do a square root or a fourth root or a fifth root, that's the kind of math that's involved with setting growth rates for year periods, for long periods of time. You had to either involve logarithms. That meant pulling out the old chemical rubber company handbook, looking up lots of numbers and jotting them down, and then adding and subtracting them ad infinitum. Or you had to grab something called a slide rule. You could always tell the geeks, they were the ones with the really long slide rules hanging on their belts, made out of some exotic metal. But slide rules were fast, but they weren't as precise as they needed to be. And this is the time that George Nicholson is writing and trying to set a goal for growth. And so I think what Nicholson basically did was he said, well, for the last 50, 60 years, the stock market's grown about 10 or 11%, compounded annually over that long, long period of time. Now, there were obviously periods of time within that 50 or 60 years when the market grew a lot faster, and there were obviously periods of time, think 1929, 1930, when the stock market grew a lot more slowly. But I think what Nicholson was saying to himself was, if the average was 10 or 11%, then I should be able to beat the market by about 5 points. So when I talk to people in these investment clubs, I'll suggest that a goal of 15% is something they should aim at. We've discovered Nicholson writing years later about setting that goal and actually admitting that that was a pretty far out there, a pretty aggressive goal for him to have set for the first investment clubs that were around, but said it he did, and we've been kind of aiming at it ever since. Well, you know, I think that there's a lot of other places today that we can look at and maybe do a little bit better than just this one-size-fits-all goal of 15%. You all know that Value Line puts on their front page a little box, and here's an example of that box from Value Line. This one says 55%. Well, that means 55% growth. Value Line thinks that its 1,700 stocks will grow that much in a 3 to 5 year period. That's kind of a squishy timeline. It's a little bit difficult to do arithmetic on a 3 to 5 year period, so assumptions have to be made. But if we think about it, if that number, instead of being 55%, were 100%, then Value Line would basically be saying that over 5 years, the stock market is growing around 15. When it's 55, we can do some arithmetic, made some assumptions, and instead of 15, that 55 would translate into about 11.5% growth per year, and that's just a little bit faster than the historic long-term average of somewhere between 10 and 11%. Note that in March of 2009, the potential was 185%. Yep, we're reading that correctly. It's 185%. And that translates to an annualized value of almost 30% per year. By the same token, in July of 2007, a little more than 4 years ago by this time, the potential in the market had dropped to what Value Line termed 35%. And if we turn that into a yearly number, that's somewhere around 7.5 or 8%. So yes, indeed, stock prices do fluctuate, and maybe our goal that we're setting for ourselves should fluctuate as well. Manifest does this every single day. Mark's already pointed out that every single day in the 24, 25, 26, 2,700 stocks that Manifest covers, every single day my par is calculated. And it's nothing more than the potential of all of the stocks added together and then divided by how many stocks there are. It's the potential average return for the entire universe that Manifest covers. On the day that I captured this slide right here, the MyPar number was 7.5%. That's significantly below the Nicholson average of 10 to 11%. So if we were using a variable target, maybe telling a club that it had to aim at 15% would have been a little bit aggressive. By the same token, remember that number in 2008 that translated into a compounded return of over 30%? Would it have been right for your club to have aimed at a 15% growth when the average stock was going to turn back 30%? Think about that for just a moment. Maybe this idea of a variable target, of a variable goal, makes a little bit of sense. Here's a club that I belong to. It's been in existence for, about 4 years now, And at the time I shot this slide, the club was doing 14.9. The market was doing 10.4. And, you know, the club was reasonably happy. They were beating the market by 4.5 points. This club today is beating the market by almost 9 points, even though its internal rate of return is down from the 14.9 where it was. As an aside, think of the 4 years that this club has been in existence. It started in 5/31/2007, probably a very inauspicious time to begin an investment club, and that means that most of the members in this club, for purposes of investing, have only lived through that terrible recession and the dramatic rebound that came in 2009. Here's another club that's a model club up in my area. This club's been in existence for about 8 years, and look at its internal rate of return, 10.7% compared to the market of 5.5. That's a plus, a beating the market number of 5.2%. Now, if I run this slide today for this club, the internal rate of return is a little bit lower than 10.7, but the market is returning even less, and the club's relative return has risen to about 7.5%.
Wow.
These are the kinds of goals that I think that a club can generate and can follow today, and these are the types of numbers that I think you can talk about very, very easily with your club members and make the case for either beating the market or maybe have a long, hard discussion about why you're not coming even close to what the market's been doing. Too often I see numbers from clubs where they really have absolutely no idea how they're doing in relation to anything. But with today's accounting software, whether you're using Viveo, this is a Viveo report, or whether you're using Club Accounting, you can write these reports in literally seconds. I urge your club to do it. I think Mr. Nicholson would be pleased that instead of talking about 15% growth, we're now talking about beating the market by 5 points. That's the goal that the investment clubs that we model up here in Michigan set, and it's a goal that I offer for your consideration. Not only can it be done, but it keeps you aggressive when the market is handing you big numbers, and it keeps you focused on what the real reason for being in the club, besides education, is in the first place. Mark, comment.
Well, I was just going to say I think it's a great area to be. I was going to encourage. Well, first of all, I was going to say maybe we need to get those 2 model clubs to pick some stocks for the Roundtable. And I was just going to see if Kim or Hugh had anything that they want to add to that.
No, I think it's a really good point. I mean, the 15% for a portfolio, you know, it's a good return. It's a good thing to aim for. But you're quite right. There are times when that would be quite impossible, and perhaps even unrealistic. And I think for new clubs, it could be a very frustrating experience because there might be a sense of failure, you know, if that cannot be achieved, you know, particularly for the first few years, because really, in a sense, the things that are taught by George Nicholson will head you in the direction of buying companies that are often temporarily out of favor. And it can sometimes take a while for a company to gain its momentum. So I would always have cautioned clubs, particularly when I was in New Jersey, that you really shouldn't expect for the first few years to hit 15% annually or anything close to it as you're kind of building up a portfolio. If you're beating inflation, that, as I was chatting with you guys earlier, that's your floor.
Yeah, we definitely want to do better than that. Kim, do you have any experience dealing with clubs that have had frustration over, especially in these recent years when returns for the overall market have been so poor?
Absolutely. I'd have to say that what I've found with a lot of clubs, and even one of my own, is they have a tendency to forget that markets go up, markets go down, and we have to be consistent in our goals. And if we're not, and not picking good quality companies, sometimes you've got to recognize you have a learning curve in learning these practices of what Nicholson does, that as we learn, you're going to get better at it. So it's hard to just straight out of the gate start a club and get 15%.
Yeah, and I think, in fact, in the session that we had just a few days ago with the name of the club escapes me, but the club is 3.5 years old. During their time as an investment club, the market had actually lost like 1% per year, and they had a return, I believe, in the 7 or 8% range. Again, I don't call that failure, and I think they should be high-fiving instead of feeling gloomy that they're not doing the 15%. You've got to always put things in context and in perspective, and I think what Ken has shared here tonight is a way to really reinforce that with investment clubs everywhere.
I think the deal too is, obviously, if you look at the average return, I haven't seen it recently, but since 1926, when numbers became a little bit more credible, it's 10.6%. So 5 percentage points above that, or 4.4, would get you to the 15% goal.
Mm-hmm.
And just to echo what Ken says, I think that probably was the objective. I mean, you look at the universe of stocks that Value Line follows. Well, there are companies in there that you just wouldn't consider buying. You really want to try to weed out the cream of the crop, the ones at the very top, so that you actually do stand a good chance of doing better than the overall market, because you're buying quality companies and you're hoping to buy them at a low price.
I like that word that Kim used, that consistency, because I think that's the most difficult thing to get across to a new club, Kim. It's that they shouldn't abandon something that has been tried and true. They should stick with it. It's awful tough for a new club that feels they're not making money or feels they're not hitting some arbitrary goal to go off and do strange things on a month-by-month basis and lose sight of what it is they're really trying to accomplish.
Exactly, because I think the thing is you expect to reach your goal, and when the market is throwing out everything in the bathwater, the trick to do it is to make sure you're finding that good quality company that maybe, because it's been thrown out in the bathwater, it's lost 25% of its value just because it's in a certain sector that's out of favor, and look where you can get that kind of return. That's what you've got to look at.
Absolutely, and that's a good segue to our next section, because we're going to certainly be looking at some scoreboard snapshots. The stocks that we pick, we really do believe they're going to be okay over the long term, even though some of you are out there shaking your heads.